Most people believe comedy is about writing better jokes. That's only half the truth. The real difference between average humor and unforgettable conversational comedy is not what is said, but how long the moment is allowed to breathe before it snaps. Because when you study great talk show interactions closely, you realize something unusual. The funniest moments are rarely the most prepared ones. They are the ones that feel slightly unstable, like something could go wrong at any second, and somehow doesn't. Wow, you look incredible. Seriously, wow. Thank you, I wore this just for you. Oh, thank you, so I can match your mug. That is a snake bracelet on your hand. What even is that? A hand bracelet, or a very classy handcuff? It's basically a very expensive, socially acceptable handcuff. Should we set a safety word just in case? Yeah, let's do it. How about rattles? Perfect rattle it is. Craig Ferguson's comedy style is often discussed as one of the most distinctive examples of conversational improvisation in modern late-night television. When he hosted The Late Late Show with Craig Ferguson from 2005 to 2014, he produced over 2,000 episodes, many of which featured minimal scripting in interviews and a heavy reliance on spontaneous dialogue. Unlike traditional late-night formats that depend on tightly written monologues, his approach leaned heavily into improvisation, silence, and controlled awkwardness. What makes his style notable is not just personality, but measurable structural difference in delivery. Studies in comedy analyses of late-night formats have shown that conventional hosts typically maintain a joke density of around 6-10 scripted punchlines per minute during monologues, whereas Ferguson often reduced that density in interviews to fewer than 2 structured jokes per minute. Instead, he replaced scripted humor with conversational unpredictability, allowing pauses, interruptions, and audience reaction to become part of the comedic structure itself. Most hosts rely on what is called set-up punchline compression, where tension is built quickly and resolved immediately. Ferguson's method, however, operates on extended timing loops. He often allows conversational gaps of 2-5 seconds, significantly longer than the industry average of under 1.5 seconds in televised talk shows before responding. This delay is not accidental. It creates cognitive anticipation in the audience, a psychological effect linked to increased humor perception when resolution is delayed but eventually delivered safely. Most people, when a conversation starts to feel slightly uncertain or socially risky, tend to follow 2 instinctive behavioral patterns. Either they retreat to reduce tension, or they escalate humor aggressively to break it. Ferguson consistently avoids both responses. Instead, he stabilizes the tension without resolving it too quickly. He maintains what comedy theorists sometimes refer to as controlled ambiguity, a state where meaning is suggested but not finalized, allowing the audience's interpretation to complete the joke internally. This technique is particularly effective in live television environments, where audience feedback is immediate. In a typical studio setting, audience laughter peaks within 0.512 seconds after a punchline. Ferguson often delays the punchline or fragments it into conversational pieces, creating multiple micro-peaks of laughter instead of one single response curve. This results in a more distributed emotional reaction, where humor is sustained across longer conversational stretches. In practical terms, this is why his exchanges feel unpredictable but still coherent. He allows the conversation to approach a boundary moment, a point where social tension or awkwardness could escalate, but instead of crossing into discomfort, he stabilizes it with timing, silence, or self-correction. The humor emerges not from breaking rules, but from demonstrating awareness of them and deliberately hovering at their edge. That near-crossing effect is what makes moments like these work. That is a snake bracelet on your hand. What even is that? A hand bracelet, or a very classy handcuff? It's basically a very expensive, socially acceptable handcuff. In this exchange, the humor is not in a punchline alone, but in the layered ambiguity. The object is socially interpretable in multiple ways, and the joke exists in the oscillation between those interpretations. Ferguson's role is to guide that oscillation without forcing a conclusion too early. The same principle applies when he introduces safety mechanisms like humor-based safety words or self-interrupting jokes. These are not just comedic devices, they function as timing resets. In live performance theory, interrupting a comedic flow at precisely the 60–90% tension threshold has been shown to maximize audience engagement because it prevents emotional saturation while maintaining anticipation. What makes his approach statistic? Ally unusual compared to standard talk show formats is that he often operates with intentionally incomplete joke structures. Instead of full setup, right arrow, punchline, right arrow reaction sequences, his segments frequently resemble looping conversational fragments where closure is delayed or redistributed. This increases audience cognitive participation, meaning viewers mentally complete the joke themselves before resolution arrives. Most people, when trying to be funny in conversation, either overprepare or overreact. But Ferguson's method shows a different model entirely: controlled instability. He keeps the conversational environment just stable enough to remain safe, but just uncertain enough to remain interesting. That balance, measurable in timing, pacing, and response delay, is what transforms ordinary dialogue into comedic performance. Many a time. Oh, really? Happy birthday. Thank you very much indeed. Happy birthday, many happy returns. I'm almost, next year I'm 40. How the hell did that happen? You get to go back now, you can just lie about your age. Yeah, and also, you become non-threatening to attractive women because you're so old. You can just hit on them and nothing happens. I've always liked older men. There you go, that's the girl. How are you? I'm all right. Really? Yeah. English, I say. Don't hold it against me, dear. I know how you feel about the English. I love England, I do. I've always loved English girls. I've also very much enjoyed doing to them what their ancestors did to my country. Laughter erupts. This exchange comes from a style of late-night television performance that became strongly associated with The Late Late Show with Craig Ferguson, which ran from 2005 to 2014 and produced more than 2,000 episodes. Unlike many American late-night formats that rely on tightly scripted monologues and structured punchlines, Ferguson's approach leaned heavily on improvisation, conversational disruption, and what comedy researchers often describe as controlled awkwardness. From a timing perspective, traditional late-night comedy typically follows a structured rhythm: setup 1-3 seconds, punchline under 2 seconds, and audience reaction 1-2 seconds. In contrast, Ferguson's interviews frequently extend conversational beats to 3-6 seconds of unscripted space, especially during moments of tension or ambiguity. This extended timing window is significant because humor perception studies show that comedic tension is often strongest when resolution is delayed slightly beyond expectation, but not so long that cognitive engagement drops. The exchange above also demonstrates a key principle in improvisational comedy, known as incongruity with delayed resolution. Cognitive research in humor psychology suggests that the brain processes humor by detecting a mismatch between expected meaning and actual meaning, then resolving that mismatch. Ferguson's method intentionally prolongs that unresolved state, allowing ambiguity to accumulate before resolving it through tone, self-correction, or abrupt conversational shifts. Another measurable feature of his style is role inversion. In most talk show formats, the host maintains conversational dominance, asking structured questions and guiding narrative flow. Ferguson frequently breaks this pattern by adopting a less authoritative or even uncertain conversational role. This creates what performance theorists describe as status fluctuation, where perceived social hierarchy between participants shifts repeatedly within a single exchange. That instability increases audience engagement because it prevents conversational predictability. In long-form analysis of televised comedy, segments like this are often categorized as high-participation humor environments. Unlike stand-up comedy, where audience interaction is limited to reaction, Ferguson's format allows real-time co-construction of humor between host, guest, and audience. This is significant because studies in live performance dynamics suggest that shared improvisation can increase audience retention of humorous content by as much as 20–30% compared to fully scripted formats. The exchange also demonstrates the use of controlled ambiguity in social boundaries. When conversational topics shift towards sensitive or semi-provocative territory, Ferguson does not fully commit to escalation or retreat. Instead, he hovers at the boundary of acceptable discourse, often softening or redirecting just before tension becomes discomfort. This technique aligns with what humor theorists describe as safe violation theory, where humor arises when a social rule is bent but not fully broken. Importantly, the effectiveness of this style is reinforced by restraint. In televised environments, audience laughter typically peaks within 0.5 to 1.5 seconds after a comedic trigger. Ferguson frequently avoids extending jokes beyond that peak window. Instead of reinforcing a punchline, he often interrupts. It shifts topic or reacts to audience response, preserving the spontaneity of the moment rather than overdeveloping it. Over the course of more than a decade of broadcasting and thousands of interviews, this method became one of the defining structural differences between Ferguson's show and other late-night programs of the same era. Where many hosts relied on high-density joke scripting, Ferguson's humor emerged from timing variance, conversational unpredictability, and deliberate understatement. Ultimately, what makes this exchange effective is not individual lines, but the architecture behind them: extended timing gaps, fluctuating conversational status, controlled ambiguity, and strategic restraint. These elements combine to produce humor that is not delivered as a fixed product, but generated in real time through interaction. Very nice to meet you, Bren. She does that voice, which has the same effect on women as a French accent on a man. I will not be able to control myself. Let's do it again. I can do this. Laughter and applause. You shouldn't have studied that, you know. It's a very dangerous game. You don't know French people who are terrible with accents, and Scottish accents specifically. We have to. Sorry, that dress is very distracting. It's fine, I'm just having a hard time. Is that a tattoo? Yeah, I've got a lot of them. A lot. This goes all the way up. Whoa, follow the snake. Go on down there. Laughter. What are you going to do? That thing. Regret it later. Can I just ask you something? Next time you want the bell, just ask. I'll bring it over. Don't lean across the desk. Laughter and applause. This kind of exchange is best understood in the context of how modern late-night television actually functions in measurable production terms. On The Late Late Show with Craig Ferguson, which ran for roughly 10 years, 2005-2014, and produced over 2,000 episodes, Ferguson's format diverged significantly from industry norms in structure, timing, and improvisation rate. In most late-night formats, monologues are tightly scripted, averaging around 500-800 words, and delivered with a punchline density of roughly 6-10 jokes per minute. Interview segments typically maintain a structured cadence: question, right arrow, response, right arrow, follow-up, scripted joke. Ferguson's interviews, however, often reduce scripted joke density dramatically. Analysts of his segments estimate fewer than 2 traditional punchlines per minute during guest interactions, with the remainder being improvised dialogue, reaction, or transitional humor. The exchange above demonstrates a different metric that comedy researchers often refer to as latency-based humor construction. Instead of rapid joke delivery, Ferguson frequently uses extended timing gaps, typically 2 to 5 seconds between conversational beats in interviews. In contrast, mainstream television dialogue tends to maintain sub-1 5-second response timing to preserve pacing efficiency. The increased latency creates what cognitive psychology refers to as anticipatory load, where the audience's brain actively predicts multiple possible outcomes before resolution occurs. This prediction phase is critical. Studies in humor cognition suggest that humor intensity increases when the brain holds unresolved ambiguity for approximately 2-4 seconds before resolution. Ferguson's conversational rhythm consistently operates within that optimal window, especially during improvisational exchanges like this one. Another measurable element is interactional status volatility. In traditional talk shows, host dominance is stable in over 80% of exchanges. Host asks, guest answers. Ferguson's interviews regularly invert or destabilize this ratio, with conversational control shifting multiple times within a single 30-60 second segment. This creates what performance analysts call status oscillation, which increases viewer attention because the social hierarchy is not predictable. Yeah, did you do runway modeling before? Oh, I imagine you probably did. Normally I can speak, but not today. It's kind of hot in here. Is it hot in here? Well, you're wearing that. Laughter. Here the humor emerges not from a single joke, but from layered escalation cycles. Each line slightly increases social tension, but instead of resolving it immediately, the exchange loops through reinforcement and deflection. This looping structure is important. Improvisational comedy studies show that multi-step escalation produces higher audience laughter amplitude compared to single punchline structures, because emotional buildup is distributed across several micro-anticipation points. Another key mechanism is controlled ambiguity management. Ferguson often allows statements to remain semantically open-ended for 3-6 conversational beats. In cognitive linguistics, ambiguity increases processing time, and that additional processing time correlates with stronger humor response once resolution occurs. Essentially, the brain works harder before laughing, which increases perceived comedic payoff. My arms don't work, but I've got a lot of spirit. Laughter. I'm nervous about this. I can't do this. Oh, I bet you can. How creepy am I right now? Very. It was a joke. It's even more awkward than the awkward pause. Yes, exactly. This section demonstrates what performance researchers call intentional discomfort framing, where awkwardness is acknowledged rather than avoided. Audience response studies in live studio environments show that when awkwardness is explicitly recognized and contained, laughter probability increases by approximately 15–25% compared to situations where awkwardness is ignored or escalated. Another structural factor is self-interruption rate. Across Ferguson's interview segments, analysts have noted frequent self-corrections or conversational resets occurring roughly every 20–40 seconds during high improvisation interactions. This is significant because it prevents comedic saturation, a phenomenon where jokes lose impact when extended beyond optimal cognitive processing limits, typically 6–8 seconds of sustained comedic focus per beat in conversational comedy. You look lovely tonight in that purple dress. Stop it. I said frock. Laughter. You look lovely in that booby shirt. I see you favor boobies as well. I'm not competing, you win, hands down. Laughter. Here, the structure follows a rapid oscillation model. Suggestion, right arrow correction, right arrow escalation, right arrow deflation. This pattern prevents any single comedic direction from becoming dominant for too long, maintaining engagement through directional variability rather than punchline accumulation. From a systems perspective, Ferguson's style can be modeled as a low-script, high-variance communication environment. Compared to traditional talk shows, where scripted content may account for 70–85% of dialogue, Ferguson's improvisational segments often invert that ratio, relying heavily on spontaneous generation. This increases unpredictability, which is strongly correlated with audience attention retention in live broadcast environments. I'd like to show you something. It's a tattoo, but it's very small. So small that I'm embarrassed it had to be that small. Laughter. At a structural level, this final pattern demonstrates minimal resolution humor design. Jokes are introduced, partially expanded, and then released before full narrative completion. Research in comedic timing shows that incomplete resolution jokes can actually outperform fully resolved punchlines in audience recall tests by approximately 10–18% because the brain actively completes missing narrative elements. Ultimately, what appears to be casual conversational humor is actually a highly consistent system built on measurable principles. Extended latency timing, 2–5 seconds, status fluctuation, multiple role shifts per segment, controlled ambiguity, multi-interpretation phrasing held for several beats, and self-interruption cycles every 20–40 seconds in improvisational stretches. Together, these elements form a structured improvisational framework rather than random spontaneity. In this sense, the humor is not simply in what is said, it is in how precisely the timing, ambiguity, and interactional control are managed in real time, creating a conversational system where laughter emerges as a predictable outcome of carefully engineered unpredictability. If you want more deep breakdowns like this, where we analyze the psychology, timing, and structure behind real conversational comedy and audience engagement, then stay tuned for the next breakdown.